Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm Colonel Matt Ryan, go by T2. I'm the Division Chief for the newly formed Advanced Training Capabilities Division in LCMC. And today we're here to talk about Great Power Competition and some of the reorganization that's happening in the United States Air Force because of that. So really what we want to do today is talk about some of the changes that we're making in response to changes that have happened in the strategic landscape globally. So the SecAF and the Chief have directed both reorganizational changes and functional changes to the Air Force. And some of those have had some significant impacts to us here in Air Force Materiel Command. So that's specifically what we want to talk about today. So some of the things that are driving those changes, in particular, the ascendance of some of the new domains. So we've talked multi-domain warfare for quite a while, but in particular, last few years, right, we've seen the rise of cyber and space in particular, and the importance of the impact that those have on our traditional fighting domains. So that's really driven some need for change into our force. And then just uncertainty around the world with regard to some of the peer and pacing adversaries that are out there. And some of the posture that they've taken. We talked about the Davidson window on Tuesday morning, if you were in the opening session. And then if you look at just the pace of technology right now and the opportunities in particular that provides for asymmetric advantages in some cases, and just how some of our adversaries have frankly caught up with us. So for all those reasons and some others, the Secretary and the Chief have directed significant changes across our force and across our structure. And in particular, they've asked us to focus on 4 key areas. The first of those is how we go about developing our personnel. Secondly, how do we generate readiness? And then the third one is how we project power around the world. And then finally, how we develop capabilities. You can see that several of those topics fit within kind of the ITSEC lane of interest, but we're going to focus on one of those today, and that is developing capabilities. So with me on the stage are a number of folks from some of the centers within Air Force Materiel Command. So we're going to talk about how Air Force Materiel Command in particular is changing and how some of the changes that are tangential or connecting tissue to Air Force Materiel Command and how that might impact how we go about doing acquisitions and perhaps how you go about supporting us in that endeavor to bring capabilities to our warfighting arm here within the Air Force and how we support the other services. So the way this will work is we're going to go down the row here and I'll have the panelists introduce themselves and then we'll have a little bit of back and forth amongst ourselves, and then I would ask that you in the audience participate by sending questions in for us, and we'll address those toward the end of the panel. So that'll kind of be the flow for the day. So we will start with Mr. D'Angelo, who is from LCMC. Sir, could you introduce yourself, maybe talk a little bit about how the center construct, or how your background, first of all, where the center fits in GPC, just touch on that just a little bit and kind of the mission of the center.
Yeah, okay. Well, hi everybody. Thanks for being here this morning. I'm Dennis D'Angelo. I'm the Executive Director of the Air Force Lifecycle Management Center. And I picked up my position about a year ago. I've been in the job for about 14, 15 months now. When I came in, Lifecycle Management Center was primarily responsible for the organizing, training, and equipping of the personnel that we put forward for the PEOs, many who are here today, and all that. But we are changing in the future. We will restructure Air Force Lifecycle Management Center into Air Dominance Systems Center. And what that will look like in the future is that we will have some functions as a program executive officer at PEO. We will have programs under this, under combat readiness. We'll also look at enterprise product support in the future. And we'll talk probably a little bit later in more depth about integrating PEOs and how we expect to be working with them. My past experience was that I came from the ops world out mainly in COCOMs and combatant commands. Last one was with United States Central Command, but then I moved into sustainment at at Tinker Air Force Base before my time at Wright-Patterson, where I ran supply chain and also we ran the depots there. So the integration and the collaboration between those two organizations will be extremely important in the future. And in this new job, we'll get the opportunity to do that quite a bit for new weapon systems as well as for sustaining existing legacy weapon systems. So I think it's really, it's a pretty challenging time, but it's also a really great time. Thank you very much for letting me do that interview.
Thank you, sir. And then Mr. Phillipson from AFRL, if you could introduce yourself, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, I'm used to leaning for the mic, so hopefully y'all can hear me well. If you looked at the material ahead of time, you're probably wondering which one of us is Brigadier General Jason Bartolome as the commander of the Air Force Research Lab. It's not me, but I'm standing in for him. I appreciate the intro. I'm going to ask, and I'm not big into audience participation, but I want to ask real quick, how many morning people do we have? Morning people. It's morning, so if you're a morning person, you want to raise your hand. I'm not one of you, so so good morning. I am excited, however, to be here. I am Daryl Phillipson. I'm currently the director of the Materials and Manufacturing Directorate within the Air Force Research Lab, but I have a pretty broad background from enlisted to officer to contractor. I worked for Lockheed for a while, worked for a small business building satellites for a while, did my own financial planning. But most relevant to this panel is, as an additional hat over the last year, I've been AFRL's lead for implementing the Great Power Competition reoptimization actions from the SECAF. So that's really the kind of the perspective that I'm bringing from it. If you're not familiar with the Air Force Research Lab, we are kind of the department of the Air Force Research Lab, so it's one laboratory supporting both services now that we have a Space Force, so we do have Air Force and Space Force. And one of our responsibilities is maintaining a great breadth of technical competence to advise, to inform, to be not only be informed by, but inform the Air Force going forward on current capabilities, next-gen capabilities, and future, so we can win again and again. Additionally, on top of that, it's integrating that competency, integrating to deliver capabilities with industry. Most of our integration, most of our delivery of capability is really through industry. It's a collaboration and that partnership, which is why I'm glad to be here today. In terms of GPC, probably the biggest thing, and I'll cover a little bit more later, is we're excited about the changes that are happening with Great Power Competition, because it starts addressing one of the Achilles heel of the S&T community. And I don't think it's just the AFRL, Air Force Research Lab, Achilles heel, but I think it's industry as well, which is it promises to get a much more consolidated, integrated, prioritized demand signal. And I think that helps industry, that helps S&T. I think it helps us all really kind of create better and move faster capability to win in the future. General Bartolome is probably funnier and faster than me, so I'll just end my intro with I got a joke. Is that all right?
Sure, fire away.
All right. I only have 2 jokes, and I was at a materials conference earlier this week, and I gave them that one. And you don't want that one. It's funny, but only to materials engineers. So we got a mechanical engineer, electrical engineer, and a computer scientist. So computer scientist, right? Computer engineer in a car, driving cross country, and the car breaks down. Mechanical engineer jumps out, goes, drivetrain, transmission, I got this covered. Can't figure out what it is. Electrical engineer goes, I got it. Electrical, we got a short, fuse change, something. I got it. Can't figure it out. Computer engineer jumps out of the car and goes, voices up, and he goes, wait. Let's all get out, get back in, and see if it works.
Touche.
That's my joke.
Thanks, sir.
But
Appreciate that. Audience appreciates that.
Anyway.
I'll keep my day job.
So moving right along, Colonel Quinones.
I got some laughs.
Colonel Quinones is the acting program executive officer for the newly formed training directorate within LCMC.
Hey, thanks, T2. Good morning. I do not have a joke, so sorry about that. I may have to go Google something before we finish here. So good morning, everybody. It's great to see all of you here, and it's been a really good week. Well, kind of short week. PEO training is the newly formed PEO, and is relevant to the GPC discussion because it was driven by the realignment the Secretary Kendall and the Chief is asking us to do. But before I think I would like to kind of put it together very quickly for the team, so kind of why this matters and why is it that we're trying to accomplish. So many of you have heard Secretary Kendall and the Chief talk about it's a time of consequence. The strategic environment is changing, and we need to change with it in order to be able to execute the mission. And yeah, there's a lot of changes. T2 kind of did a quick summary of those. But within those changes is all about mission readiness. It's taking us back to we need to follow all those pillars in order to be mission ready, beyond just to be proficient or functional areas, but we actually need to be overall mission ready. And some of those changes took us into what I believe, for the purposes of discussion today and the perspective of training, it takes us into two big things. Number one, the creation of the Airman Development Center, the ADC, which is going to be tasked with the creation, the objective training across multiple functionals to get airmen ready for the fight and for the new fight, for the new environment. That change also drove some realignments in how we actually present material solutions to multiple centers and multiple commands. And one of those big changes, and Mr. D'Angelo talked about that as Air Dominance Centers comes online, was the creation of the PEO training, which is a combination of the MATAC, which are mobility training aircraft, and then the formal Agile Combat Support, combined into one PEO. They actually brings training aircraft, simulators, and other capabilities into one portfolio. Why that matters? Well, it matters because the Chief and the Secretary are telling us that one of our biggest advantages is training. We cannot give up on that. We need to maintain our warfighters ready to engage, and he wants to make training a priority on how we move forward. So having an enterprise focus on training across not only the operational side that the new command will do, and also on the materiel side, on the PEO training, is how we are re-energizing the solutions and the possibilities and providing capabilities to that enterprise. So I think as we continue to go through this week, later on we're going to talk a little bit more about PEO training, is that perspective of training coming to the forefront is really how training and GPC are connected. And it's our charge as part of the new created training PEO to actually rethink how we present and develop capabilities to support that training environment. So I look forward to have the conversation today. Do we have everything figured out? We don't. It's a lot of learning. There's still a broken glass, but you know what? We're not stopping. We're going to move forward. We're going to go 100 miles an hour because this matters, and we need to get it done as soon as possible. So I look forward to the conversation today, and to hopefully we can help educate on how PEO training is going to help the fight. Thank you.
Thank you. So Colonel Jaime is joining us from the Integration Development Office, also newly formed. Over to you, sir.
Good morning, everyone. I'm also not a morning person, and this bright lights right on my face this early in the morning, it's not a good combination. But I've been in the IDO for about 4 months. Before that, I was at Hill Air Force Base at Sentinel. Can I get a shout out from the Sentinel corner over there? There we go. So the IDO was one.
Groupies, oh.
Yeah. Yeah. The IDO was one of 24 GPC changes announced at AFA last February. But before I bring up the IDO more in detail, there's one position that oversees the IDO that's fairly new as of September, and that's the CDEO, the Capability Development Executive Officer. So the Service Acquisition Executive appointed General Richardson to be dual-headed as not only the AFMC CC commander, which he has been, but also the CDEO. And essentially, as a CDEO, he's essentially a PEO for all pre-program of record investment activities, with the proper decision authorities and oversight that a normal PEO has, but for those projects that don't have a home yet, that eventually need to be transitioned to a PEO as a program of record. So if you think of the CDEO as the PEO, then you can think of the IDEO as the SPO working directly for the CDEO. So we're essentially, the IDEO is essentially the acquisition sponsor in the gray zone, which that's what we call the IDEO, essentially to work those authorities on behalf of the CDEO for those projects that don't have a home or an easy home in that early part of the life cycle. So when there's a new idea that we need to work on, there's a process in place, there's somebody working it, there's somebody's putting in the input, the paperwork, the transition plans to make sure we're not holding up capabilities from getting to the warfighter. Another key point of the IDEO is that it doesn't fall under any of the centers. It doesn't fall under LCMC or the Nuclear Weapons Center. It falls directly under AFMC. And so that allows the IDEO to work directly with the entire FMC community to orchestrate capability development efforts on behalf of the CDEO and to be able to tie the entire AFMC material portfolio against the Air Force Force Design. So we're looking at not just the stovepipes, but the entire enterprise to see how well the Air Force is doing from an analysis perspective.
Thank you. And finally, we have Mr. Stevens from Fighters and Advanced Aircraft, and he's been one of the critical members helping to develop some of the way ahead with some of the, I think, the ways we'll be changing how we do business within LCMC. So over to you.
Thanks, T2. Appreciate it. Yeah, so good morning, all. Rod Stevens, Deputy PO for Fighters and Advanced Aircraft. About 30 years of acquisition experience, both in uniform and in civilian attire. My primary focus of why I'm here, I'm a traditional weapon system PEO, Deputy PEO representing General Voorhees. From a vertical perspective of all weapon systems, so we're responsible for, essentially all tactical aircraft, fighter aircraft, everything but the F-35. So over 4,000 aircraft that we're responsible for from a total life cycle management perspective, from the development, production, modernization, and sustainment of those weapon systems for the United States Air Force and over 30 international partners. And so the question becomes is how do I fit into this conversation as it relates to training? And it's really two things. One, from a training perspective, is Colonel Kunis has highlighted on how we develop our airmen for the future fight. We want to be closely tied to PEO training in that respect. The second thing is it relates to great power competition. As T2 had indicated, and as Colonel Kunis had talked about a seminal moment, it's a time of consequence. The Chief and the Secretary has really challenged us to look at how we fight. Stop looking at things through a vertical lens of a platform-centric solution, like a F-22 to go off and accomplish a particular task, but more of a systems-to-systems approach. And so how do we actually get after the ability to do a systems-to-systems approach to employ a particular effect? And as Colonel Ryan had alluded to, we're doing that through one of our divisions within Fighters and Advanced Aircraft known as the Agile Development Office, where we're employing our next generation air dominance family of systems approach, both from an acquisition model perspective and then also just from a architecture perspective that would allow us to create an environment to be able to go after those systems-to-systems approaches. And it ties and it dovetails into what Mr. D'Angelo was stating, is really as the Air Force is making organizational changes and standing up the Air Dominance Systems Center, the Information Dominance Systems Center, and the Nuclear Systems Center, the associated architectures that those respective center commanders and integrating PEOs will have. And so we're kind of a pilot and a pathfinder for that. One, focusing on our NGAD family of system capabilities, and then two, being able to learn for the future organizational structure of the Air Force.
Thank you. Okay, so what I'd like to do is try to work a little bit from big to small, if you will, on some of the changes that are happening within AFMC. So let's start with this, and I think maybe Mr. D'Angelo, we'll start with you, to talk about what organizational changes have already taken place, and then what other changes are coming for LCMC in particular. And then if you could also touch on why we're making those changes. What advantages or advances do we expect for our mission execution by making these changes?
Yeah, thanks, Colonel. So a couple changes I kind of mentioned in my intro. Of course, we'll reorganize to have a new name. Of course, you can't have the old name. So anyway, with Air Dominant Systems Center, what we'll do is we'll look at, as we move into a new realm, we will actually start to run programs. One of the things that we hadn't done before, we were more or less aligned to do organized training and equipment lifecycle management center. As we move into this new environment, we'll start to actually oversee some programs in combat readiness. There'll be things that we are able to do in combat readiness that we weren't able to do as just the Lifecycle Management Center, or the commander of the Lifecycle Management Center. That was primarily because the commander didn't have a link back to, a direct link as a program executive officer back to the acquisition executive. So having those programs placed within our ability to work them will be very important. We will also work with enterprise product support. We'll look at the products that we have and how we bring them in using the architectures that Mr. Stephen just mentioned. We'll look at how we do things like common support equipment so that we can reduce the footprint. One of the issues in the future combat roles is that we go pretty heavy. We usually have a lot of mobility requirements to move our equipment because a lot of the weapon systems require their own specific support equipment. So some of the things that we will do in enterprise product support will be to try to drive common support equipment as one example. So being in a position where we have control of the enterprise product support as a PEO in that area, but also what we call an integrating PEO, one that will integrate across all of the different weapon systems to bring the systems of systems type of fight that we see in the future and bring those things together. So these are changes that we didn't have in LCMC. Even though it said lifecycle management, to some extent we will have more ability to do lifecycle management and help work the system. We are still working out the details of what an integrating PEO is. Matter of fact, they just had a meeting this week on that to try to see exactly what that position will do and what type of authorities they will have over PEOs, because what we don't want to do is interrupt the program executive officers in their ability to accomplish their mission with schedule, cost, and performance. But we do want to make sure that there's certain things that we would integrate in. Simulators would be one of those, and I know that in training they're looking at how we do that. Simulation not only in the future for training on the weapon system, but actually training to maintain it for the weapon systems. There's some simulations that we could do, because when we're in a combat environment, we may have to service multitude of aircraft through the ACE construct, and this type of construct would require us to be able to handle a multitude of aircraft, and we think there's some simulation capabilities in there that will allow us to be able to do that. So through this organizational restructure, that will allow us now to have an impact on that. Of course, we'll still do the organized training and equip role, and actually right now, we're standing up IDSC also as my boss is dual-hatted until they officially announce who's going to be the commander of IDSC, which actually they did. So anyhow, so we'll still help put that mission in place. So these are the changes that we see. They revert right back to what we needed to do. Better integrate across the weapon systems, have the authority to make decisions using the integrating PEO capability, and also to be able to execute missions under the PEO role of combat readiness. And those are the changes that we're putting in place by the beginning of July of next year. Thanks.
Sure. I don't know if any other panelists, did you want to pile in on that at all?
I will. So I know Q's already talked about, one of the major changes, and that was the creation of PEO training. Obviously, is an organizational change, but again, internal to fighters and advanced aircraft, an alignment to getting after what is necessary for great power competition. I mentioned our Agile Development Office, or we call it our Advanced Aircraft Division. Within that, we created a division known as the Architecture and Systems Engineering Division. It is a platform-agnostic division that is solely focused on architectures, government reference architectures as it relates to mission systems, as it relates to autonomy for our collaborative combat aircraft, and then the associated collaborative combat aircraft mission systems. We're doing that now, one, focusing on those next generation air dominance family of system platforms. But again, as I alluded to in my opening comments, it is to be able to, at a smaller microcosm, understand that so that we're postured to a particular point in time, hand it off to the ADSC integrating PEO for them to employ that from an enterprise perspective as it relates to kind of kinetic fire architectures. So just kind of a small microcosm of an organizational change that we're making. We didn't have broad sweeping changes within fighters and advanced aircraft as a result of reoptimization for great power competition. But internal to the directorate, we are leveraging things that we're already doing from a next generation family of systems perspective that could have applicability to other weapon systems as we continue to move forward.
And I'll add from an S&T perspective, and not just AFRL really, but it's the science and technology ecosphere, right, which includes industry as well. Is Mr. D'Angelo mentioned the concept of the integrating PEO, and yeah, we're still trying to figure out exactly what that means, but a very powerful concept, right? So a big part of the shift for great power competition is going from platform centric, which forces the industry and S&T to go figure out from a platform by platform and sometimes negotiate across to where you have not only your PEOs, but you have integrating PEOs that are looking at architectures across a series of PEOs and then working together as only a few integrating PEOs to make sure our systems start integrating together. And we can get from platform, one system, to system of systems integration. From a industry and an S&T perspective, that's very powerful, because now I actually know where to focus and how to work and how to accelerate transition across that valley of death into a common architecture, as opposed to working with individual platforms and reinventing the wheel as I go along. So very powerful concept.
Right. And so you talked there about focus, and you're from the labs. Can you touch on major impacts with regard to organization and function that you see coming to the labs because of this reoptimization?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of major impacts for the lab. The biggest thing I've touched upon already is really that clarity of a demand signal. I touched upon it there, kind of riffing off Mr. D'Angelo's comments on the integrating PEO. But even larger than that, part of this reoptimization is we're going from your lead commands, ACC, AMC, having responsibility for readiness and modernization with regard to their relevant platforms, to they're going to focus on readiness. So we're standing up the ICC, the Integrated Capability Command, at the DAF level that is going to be responsible for really holistically looking at capability development. So again, it's that focus and tying it to the future force and a fully informed threat, so that we can do a vertical integration of the Air Force to ensure that we understand the priorities. We've done the right modeling, simulation, the right analysis. We've done the decomposition. We get to an IDO capability, super powerful, kind of area or domain there, helping to accentuate the horizontal integration, working with the integrated PEOs. And I'm kind of covering this from an AFRL perspective, because that all feeds a lot more clarity on where are the tech gaps that we need to fill to create the capability, to fill the capability gaps to close the mission threads to actually win today and tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. So that's very kind of like down, kind of flow down, which from a technologist perspective, it's a little scary, because we're probably 100% sure that we're not going to be 100% right on the future. But it also gives us great insights into where our senior leadership, where our nation is trying to go, which allows us to have that thought leadership and go to the other side of our mission, which is pushing technology and thinking about what didn't you ask for and where can we take you, rather than just kind of anywhere I want to go might be a good idea. I actually know and have a lot more clarity there. So that's a big part of it. Another one is through this whole shift is that we're trying to transition and institutionalize extreme teaming. In the past, we have had great cases of coalition of the willing, where we've gotten the right PEOs and the right program offices with the right acquisition folks, or with the right requirers, warfighters that are flexible and willing to work with us, with the right technologist that's going to lean forward and not, get into analysis paralysis, and you have that coalition of the willing, and it works. So we're taking that and trying to institutionalize that magic, right? So all the way along this, all the way this vertical integration, this horizontal integration, we're trying to combine those three elements: the warfighter, the acquisition, and the technologist. And then the last thing I'll touch is also, as we're setting this, an important part for AFRL is, like I said, not only kind of lining up and institutionalize how we are better informed by the DAF, but where are the right links so we can inform, not just be informed by, right? To make sure that we're thinking about those alternate potential futures, make sure we're thinking about those things that our operators that are kind of looking at the fight right in front of them might not be thinking about for the future. So that's kind of some of the bigger kind of shift areas, at least mentally, that AFRL is trying to work through.
Great, thank you.
Before you go
yeah,
to
go
that, I just have, as we talked about ICC and that single clear signal within the government side, there's also a huge benefit to our industry partners. So I want to point that out here too, because a clear signal also to industry on what exactly are the service priorities from the operational standpoint, obviously some of that for the material side, which then will allow the industry side to be able to plan their own investments in order to support their business plans, but also to try to support whatever the service is going after. So I think that the way is this envisioned, and I think it's going to be a great opportunity for both the government and the industry side to be in lockstep with regards to the priorities and where the investments need to go.
So I'd like to pull the thread a little bit on the ICC and maybe give Colonel Jaime a shot here, because I think one of the main touch points between the ICC and AFMC is probably going to be through the IDO, your office. So maybe if you could describe how you see that beginning to form, and if you have anything to add on, kind of why the ICC stood up and how it's intended to function.
I mean, if I can bring up first the ICO, out of the 3 new offices that got stood up from GPC for the capability development ecosystem, the ICO is at the top, right? And that was the very first office that got stood up in the summer in July, headed by Dr. Grayson, but now the director is Dr. Nywood, I said a month ago. It's a secretary-level office, and they're essentially tasked to facilitate and institutionalize the integrated capability development teams, which used to be called the operational imperative teams, to be able to address on a permanent basis the strategic competition priorities and modernization needs for the Air Force and the Space Force. So they are that key enabler at the department level that is much needed to between the Air Force and the Space Force to make sure that those concepts and plans for the future of both services, to make sure they're building platforms that are and weapons and systems that are not isolated, that they're systems of systems, they're interoperable, resilient, integrated, and that can execute the kill chain in a high-end fight. And lastly, they're tasked to work with the ICC and the IDO to make sure that any modernization investments recommendations that push forward to HAF-A-8, who still owns the resources, that they're based on data and real analysis. So the ICC and the IDO are going to work together to provide that data and the operational analysis information to be able to then to have the ICO provide those recommendations and those priorities to HAF-A-8 as far as where the next needs for investments are for the Air Force. And as far as the ICC, it got stood up as a provisional command in mid-September, headed by Major General Mitchum. And they're really tasked to modernize the Air Force to outpace the threat over time. So they took the role of the modernization planning for the MAJCOM A58s. And so they have 3 areas of alignment they need to work on. Number one is they need to work on the integration of the mission threats with the functional views, and I think the panel members have already discussed that a little bit. But today, when we do modernization planning, we do it in stovepipes, or what we call functional views, where ACC has modernization plans for the combat air forces, and then mobility, or AMC, has different modernization plans for mobility air forces, and you can say the same thing about the rest of the MATCHCOMs. And that has done a lot of good things for the Air Force in the past, but it's really hard to bring a systems view and approach to look holistically to see how the Air Force is being optimized. So what ICC is going to do, they're going to ingest that force design guidance that's going to come from Air Force Futures, which is HAF A57. They're going to decompose that guidance into horizontal mission threats. And what I mean by horizontal mission threats, those are the end-to-end mission tasks and activities that need to occur for a mission to be successful. They're going to integrate them with the functional views, or the stovepipes, or the modernization planning by each of the functional capability teams in the ICC, to help us to identify capability gaps that need to be addressed for the Air Force to produce that desired integrated effect and project power. So with those capability gaps, then the Air Force can start to make priorities across all the portfolios holistically with an enterprise view for investments, because the functional capability teams within the ICC will be talking across different core missions and not just focusing on their own, which is what is happening today with the MATCHCOMs. The second area of improvement or alignment for the ICC is they're tasked to align the force structure, the requirements, and the investments. So today there's many different offices and set of folks who are working on different parts of the PPBE process. You have different people working requirements, planning, execution, budgeting. So there's a lot of gaps in between ideas that are formed and the decisions that are made, and then what ends up being executed, or what the reality is later on. So since the ICC is going to be the only command focused on modernization across the entire Air Force, they will have a better ability than we do today, or that we did before 16 September, to remove those walls and to break down those barriers that have existed in the past. So for example, just as an example, you may have the same set of command and control experts from one of the functional capability teams in the ICC. They're the same set of folks who are working on the force design guidance with HAF A57, providing those inputs to them, and they're also writing the requirements. And by the way, they're also the same folks who are working with the acquisition community to make resourcing recommendations. So by having the same set of folks reaching out to different parts of the ecosystem, it helps them to remove barriers that exist today. But the ICC is not going to work on just requirements in a vacuum. They're going to work with the acquisition community. So for any new development capabilities that need to be worked on, they're going to work with the IDEO, where we match requires with acquires, and our organizations are being stood up identical as far as our organizational structure. So we're going to have the same set of folks working on the same things. And we're going to, the whole goal of the requirement piece for this effort for the ICC is to make sure that we do the necessary mission engineering and operational analysis so that the Air Force can then start to make department-level trade-offs based on no kidding, real data and analysis, so that the Air Force, if we have an extra dollar we can spend, we can be smart about where to put that dollar. Do we put it in a data link? Do we put it in a bomber? Do we put it in a weapon? And everything's based on data, not just because somebody's raised their hand first. And the third area of alignment that the ICC is tasked to work on is the development of and this has been alluded to before, the development of an integrated capability demand signal. So historically, the demand signal has been very segmented, where some of the MATCHCOMs have had one set of demand signal for something for combat air forces, and then mobility needs something completely different. And the demand signal has come from the PEOs, the MATCHCOMs, even the air staff. And there's been inconsistent prioritization and unclear connections. So it has been very difficult for industry and the lab and the S&T community to kind of really understand where the Air Force is heading next and where the Air Force strategic priorities are. So what the ICC is tasked to do is to work across all capability development portfolios and modernization plans to build a single integrated demand signal that speaks to multiple audiences. Whether you're the lab, whether you're FRDC, whether you're academia, whether you're PEO or industry, the demand signal is not going to mention specific technologies that have to be pursued or it's not going to mention anything, an answer as far as in a specific state, like a specific weapon. But instead, the demand signal is going to provide problems and gaps that have to be addressed. So it's going to be actually a set of questions that need to be addressed that are going to come directly from the force design guidance from HAF 857. So that, and this is where the benefit is for industry, you would have to spend less time and effort and money on business development trying to guess where the Air Force is getting next, or heading next. And instead, you can actually use your IRAD dollars to really help the Air Force solve locating real strategic problems. Because that demand signal is going to be consistent over time, and it's going to be clear, and we're going to work with industry and academia and FRDC to iterate on it to improve it over time. But it's going to be a set of clear priorities for the Air Force, and you're going to have a single source of truth, which has not been found in the past. So that, in a nutshell, is the ICC. Is a big time new way of doing capability development for the Air Force.
Let me tag on that for a minute, will you?
Yes, sir.
I want to tag on to that. Great rundown on the ICC and the IDO as well. So that talks primarily of modifications, and it also talks about future weapon systems. And we were bantering before this panel on what does that mean for the sustainment of existing weapon systems. And actually, it helps a lot because the ICC and the way they do this with new weapon systems will actually kind of outline where they think the priorities are as far as a war-fighting capability. It may not be the ICC that will direct how we sustain or where the money comes in for sustainment of existing weapon systems. That may come through the headquarters Air Force team. Right now it looks like the A4, the logisticians, the A3, the operators, and perhaps even the A5. The futures will look at these areas as to how they will actually allocate money for existing weapon systems. Because if we were to go to war in the next few years, we would go to war with what we have. We probably won't be able to generate new systems under the new construct. But the old systems will now have a better idea of what the priority is based on the new way that we're going to approach this and all that. Do I think we have it 100% correct? No, but we're working towards making it better so that we don't just peanut butter spread. We look at where we want to make the investments in existing weapon systems to ensure that we bring the highest level of readiness for the type of fight that we expect to participate in. So I didn't want to leave that out because we're talking all the futures, and we actually started with that. But there's a piece of sustainment in today's world that we are aware of, and we haven't forgotten it either. So thanks for letting me do that.
And another facet on that is, we know what we need to sustain,
Right.
but also we know what maybe we don't need to, right? With a holistic analysis tied to a future force design, we can have a lot more rationalization of what we might be ready to sunset, which could help us from a little bit of a flip-flop of deciding what are we going to sunset, what are we going to keep in the force, so with a little bit of stability there, we can decide maybe where not to throw additional investment in so that we can focus the resources on that new capability, on the sustainment of those capabilities that we do need to keep around.
And that helps you as industry because, once again, we give you a more clear signal on what we want, or at least you'll have an idea of where we're headed. So we think that's extremely important. And I'm pretty excited about that because sometimes we peanut butter spread the sustainment money because we peanut butter spread it, and consequently we don't get the readiness that we need. This is a good way forward for us to get that readiness. Thanks for letting me pair it off a little time.
You bet. So we've talked a little bit about some of the changes happening at HAF level, MAGCOM level, center level. Let's jump in a little bit below that now, and maybe Colonel Quinones, let you start the flow on this one. Because you're leading a brand new directorate, right, within the center. Why are we reorganizing the lower level acquisition teams? How do we think that's going to support optimization of our acquisition of new capabilities, development of new capabilities, fielding of new capabilities? Could you touch on that a little bit, and then we'll kind of go around the horn here?
Absolutely. There is significant benefit, and I will start by saying that Realignment of portfolios is not something new. Every so often throughout the life cycle of an acquisition activity, we have looked at realigning moving programs. We do those things often. I think that the big difference this time around is the fact that the realignment was driven specifically to go after the objective of that mission readiness, number one, and number two, to seek some efficiencies to line up to that specific objective. In the case of specific training we've been doing training for a very long time. We've been doing the procurement of training capabilities for a long time, but it has been under a more bifurcated approach where everybody is doing their own thing and there's no one specific area or group that is looking at the enterprise across. And why that matters, and I think Rod will kind of jump in this, is because you are an F-16 and you are trying to deliver this capability. Yeah, you have a simulator that needs to stay in line with what he's trying to deliver. Then it has specific needs, but is there any opportunity for us to make a simulator that not only supports Rod on the F-16, but it might support the training side or the mobility side? So the idea that now by having an enterprise look to training, we can then make decisions on where we put certain requirements and how we go about certain solutions that can leverage dollars and make it easier, number one, for us to support multiple functional areas, but also to extend our dollars because now everybody can leverage certain investments. So training as a directorate, and we are not the only change. Mr. D'Angelo talked obviously about some of the big changes, but in the case of training, that is the main focus. The main focus is to put everything within one look and be able to then look at the specific needs of the enterprise. And let me give you an example of the kind of things we're looking at. If you look at the production, pilot production, and I'm going to use that because that's a huge discussion within the Air Force. Pilot production is a significant piece in order for us to meet our mission and be ready. Without the right number of pilots to operate our platforms, we cannot get our job done. And if you talk to Lieutenant General Robinson and his team, this is a concern that the Air Force has. We need to maintain our numbers. And in order to generate a new pilot, you go all the way from airmanship type training at the beginning of the process to the time where you actually do a mission rehearsal and delivering a trained, proficient pilot that can operate within the joint force and coalition forces. That spectrum has been, for the last several decades, we've been doing that through multiple stovepipes. We've been doing this by developing some specific platform for the training community, by then throwing over the fence some of those activities to the actual operational units, then bringing a simulator at some point in between there to help that activity. And all has been done across multiple PEOs, multiple commands, and the demand signal has never been very clear, and it's been a little bit challenging. So what's new now? Well, what is now is that now when we talk about pilot generation, we're talking about going after certain capabilities under one umbrella. So now we can make smart decisions about, do I need an aircraft to do that work? Do I have the ability to move that into a simulator, into a different type of training? Can I actually leverage a simulator for more than one specific platform? All those opportunities is what GPC and specifically the realignment of portfolio for training is seeking. I will also take the opportunity to say that there is significant opportunities on the sustainment side, as Mr. D'Angelo mentioned, as my former job under Agile Combat Support and the specific support equipment side, there is significant opportunities to also seek enterprise solutions within the support side. No less peculiar solutions, be able to actually have a generator or a fuel bladder or a tow system that actually can support multiple platforms versus just being peculiar to one. So I think there is a significant opportunity here to actually really manage at the enterprise level versus going peculiar, unique to each platform, which is then is more of that functional approach.
Yeah, I guess I would just offer, I mean, and I may have said this a little bit earlier, but again, just to kind of build off of what Colonel Quinones was stating, GPC is about how we approach the problem statements. You gave pilot production as a vignette. How we employ and how we fight is a vignette, and we can no longer do that in a very stovepipe functional way. And we've been challenged to think about a systems approach, an enterprise approach, and we go about that by driving into having common architectures that will allow you to be able to do systems of systems. So we referenced the training aspect and the enterprise level there. From fighters and advanced aircraft perspective, we're focused on that government reference architecture at the mission system level. So how do we get software-defined, hardware-enabled, mission systems that will allow us to be able to put a mission system on a particular fighter jet, whether it's an F-15 or an F-16? How do we drive those architectures there? It's easier to do for new weapon systems, like our next generation air dominance family of systems. It's harder to do for fielded weapon systems, but working with the IDO and ICC in the funded prioritizations, that's how we can get after that. Again, is to really tackle enterprise solutions that allows us to change the way that we think about our objectives and how we fight from a systems of systems perspective and how we train from an enterprise perspective.
I'll throw a word into the middle of that too. We want to do that rapidly.
Correct.
Right? We want to be able to be able to adapt rapidly because the enterprise that we're working in today is probably not as rapidly adaptable to things as we need to be with the type of fighting that we would see ourselves in the future. And I think that's really important. I think this gives us that ability to rapidly
Absolutely.
adapt.
I would say architecture are a foundational piece that allows us to adapt. General Alvin, our chief of staff, stated that we need to adapt together, and that's all of us,
Right.
within the Air Force, our industry partners, academia, and alike. And how do we do that? And we do that through having, common architectures where appropriate, where applicable, and where there's the appropriate return on investment. Again, it's easier to do early on than it is to a fielded system, but that's something that we're striving to do. Our service acquisition executive, Secretary Hunter, also has talked about kind of an unofficial term as far as his next generation acquisition model. And that's something that we're employing within our NGAD family systems area. And that's not something that's applicable to all, but it's how we do it. How do we actually lend the requirements onto industry? And we do that through attributes, so they're not as specific as requirements. And we iterate with our operational users, so whether that's the ICC or currently Air Combat Command for us, and then having the contracting vehicles in place that allows us to create a vendor pool of industry partners with that architecture where we can adapt quickly. And so there's a lot, that we're doing as an Air Force perspective from on how we acquire. And lastly, not forgetting about AFRL, right? And making sure we stay closely tied to them through the IDO so that as technology is coming in through the IDO from, kind of birthing that program of record, then to hand off to us from a deputy PO or PO perspective.
I just want to add kind of maybe another facet to it, because we're talking very structural change, or we're talking really, organizational, but there's a cultural aspect of this as well, right? So, we talk about going from stovepipes, from platform-centric to system-of-systems centric, and there's a huge cultural element that I think we're trying to shift in the Air Force, and having that unity of intent, unity of the objective versus just the unity of command. When you have those stovepipes, which is always said to be framed as bad, but not always, if that's what you really need, is an efficient, single platform. But because in those stovepipes, they always have the best of intent. But what you're getting is a locally optimized solution, which sometimes is not very beneficial for the holistic Air Force when we're trying to pull it together, when we're trying to integrate systems of systems to operate the way we need to in the future. So it's not that it was necessarily bad, but as you're shifting, some of the organizational changes are really trying to get at the cultural change. So, for example, what it unlocks is when you talk about training pilots, how do you train pilots? Well, you talk to an organization who flies, fights, and wins like ACC. Well, you put them in the air. Do you use modeling and simulation, or do you use simulation? Do you put them in a simulator? No, you gotta burn some fuel. But as you look across all pilot training and you look across all the different applications we have, maybe there's a better way to do it as an enterprise. So it helps us kind of break down that local optimization, kind of thinking, and then take that further. Maybe you don't even put a pilot in the seat, right? Who's going to advocate for that? Well, an enterprise level view might be able to advocate for that. In an organization like the IDO that can stand up a pre-program a record kind of incubation area for a program that might not have a natural advocate is very powerful. Right. Sorry, I kind of went off.
No,
there.
that's great. So we've talked a lot about what the Air Force is doing, in particular AFMC, the centers, some changes that we're making both structurally, organizationally, functionally, a little bit, maybe culturally, though globally, right? We're not changing the core values. We're not changing things like, some of the things baked into our DNA. I think Malcolm Gladwell described us as tinkerers. We're not changing those kinds of things. But I'd like to maybe shift focus a little bit. Maybe Rod, I'll go to you to start this. Okay. And what do we think, we've got members of industry and academia here. What do we think maybe they need to consider making changes to partner with us better and collaborate better as we move forward to try to develop and field war-winning capabilities together?
Yeah, great question. So I would say, again, as I stated previously, we're in this to adapt together so that we can, respond agilely, one, to the ever-changing landscape of technology, and two, to the ever-changing landscape of the threat. And so how do we do that, and where, would be my counsel to industry and academia in that space? I've referenced architectures a lot, and I truly, believe in that, and I think our Air Force does as well. And that's a matter of buying into what we're trying to pursue under a kind of a government reference architecture. And that will mean, different things to different centers, whether you're talking sustainment or whether you're talking mission systems or whether you're talking autonomy. But it's industry buying into what we're trying to drive towards so that we can have adaptability, so that we can create vendor pools that frankly creates competition, because we want that competition to drive towards good ideas or innovative ideas on a capability we're trying to achieve. And so it would be get informed, in the respective mission areas on how the Air Force is driving towards architectures. And again, in fighters and advanced aircraft, we have an agile mission system suite, government reference architecture and autonomy government reference architecture. It's buying into that, understanding that. It's buying into kind of the infrastructure that you're going to need, that digital infrastructure that would require us to be able to collaborate in an adaptive and rapid fashion in that sense. And then have the willingness to have knowledge parity with your government teammates. We want to make sure, and architectures drive us towards that, but that's really, it's embracing that knowledge parity. Not to say that we're trying to take all intellectual property, but we want to have knowledge parity with our industry partners as we're pursuing a particular capability, so that we can be best informed on how to deliver a capability for the Air Force. And so that's part of the cultural shift as well, is the willingness to allow us to have knowledge parity and we're moving forward. And so that would be a few tenets that I would offer to you all for consideration as we move forward.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else want to pile on that?
I think I would just follow what Rod said, because I just couldn't say it any better. Rod, I think the one piece is I just kind of drill down a little bit is vendor log is something we want to stop. Right. And we need industry to come along with that. It's not because this is not has something to do with a specific issue with any other one company or another. Is because we cannot get the job done because be mission ready, adaptive, and be innovative to get the job done. If we constantly have to deal with the vendor lock situation, which I think what standards and architecture allow us to bypass. If everybody understands what the standard is, how you can participate, how you'll be able to bring your products on board and compete within an environment and a set of architectures that you understand, the government understands, then we can move fast. We can bring some of your new technologies more faster, be able to provide that to the user in a timely manner without having to recreate and spend the dollars every time a new system comes on board. So I think as we talk about shifting the culture on the government side, we're trying our industry partners to come along on that specific perspective.
I'm going to throw some out, as Will said. I'm going to tag on to this, but I'm going to twist it just a tad bit. So we've got to give you something too. The collaboration is extremely important, but we know that many of you out there will be small businesses or smaller than an OEM, right? And you're trying to do work and you're trying to work with us. And my goal would be to bring you in to be able to do work with us without bankrupting you, right? Because right now, I almost bankrupt you when I bring you in. There's a lot of hoops you have to go through. I bring this as baggage from my last job because every time I was trying to work with small businesses or something, I would make it extremely hard for them to the point where they didn't even know if they were going to get a carry-on contract. Sometimes it would be a SIBR, and we had no way to actually get that system into a PEO to say, hey, you got to pick this up, and here's the person that can make that happen. So working with I own the small business guys in LCMC, so we're working with them to relook how they work with small businesses. Right now, we do a lot of small business work that's really not hardware related. It's more, maybe thought related, knowledge related. But there are things that we can do to help the rest of the community better able to bring in the type of small businesses we need. And we've got to be integrated to the point where we might have to have multiple sources, though we don't like to do that because it costs us. But in many cases, you would. You'd hate to have somebody that does something that's extremely important for a weapon system, and suddenly they decide that at age 80, they want to go and retire, which you couldn't blame them. And you don't have a process by which you could find somebody else to do it. So we're looking at, across the multitude of programs we have, part of this is that enterprise product support that I talked to you about, that we're looking at how then we blend it with the PEOs to see if there's something that we can do to help them bring some of these small businesses in to do the work that they need, and with a contract rather than just something that's a small business research investment. So we'll do some things also to help that system so that you have an opportunity to share in helping us build the readiness that we need.
Yeah, sir, I would offer in spot on. We're getting after that too, within our NGAD family of systems. And I know the Air Force isn't doing it broadly, but that's something that Secretary Hunter has talked about. And it depends upon the acquisition. It depends upon what capability you're pursuing. But we are all in on trying to create vendor pools that are both traditional and non-traditional defense industrial base teammates, so that we can afford the opportunities to allow merit and competition drive us to where we go. And so, our PEO, General Voorhees, and under Secretary Hunter, we're aligned to how do we do that. So from a business model perspective, what can we put in place? And that's one thing we've adopted under our NGAD family of systems, and where we're looking to try to employ elsewhere within fighters and advanced aircraft.
Yeah, we use the tagline, innovation-friendly portfolios, right?
Couldn't say it better.
Yep, it accelerates the ability to get across the valley of death and bring innovative technologies into the weapon systems.
I'll add the I and the ICO, ICC, and IDO is integrated, right? So we need common solutions across platforms. We've talked about this morning, systems of systems. So vendor lock, it's not going to help us out. I already mentioned this, but that demand signal from the ICC with the help of the IDO is going to come out this spring. It's going to be far from perfect, not anywhere near 100%. So we're going to need critical thinking minds, innovative minds to help us really nail down, are these the right questions we should be asking based on the force assigned? So when you get that, based on however we send it out, we have to still work through that, an RFI of sorts. Please be looking out for that and respond to that with a critical thinking mind. Are these the right questions that we need to be asking for that consistent, clear demand signal that we're going to be iterating on for months and years to come?
As you bring that up, I've been thinking about it. I do want to kind of highlight, we're talking about a single demand signal, clear demand signal. There's going to be more than one demand signal for the DAF, right? So we're talking about an order of magnitude and clarity and a place to go to understand the prioritized demand signal for modernization. it's not going to be it's not an absolute funnel, but at least you have a place, authoritative source, and know where you're getting your guidance from. There's still just in all openness, we're still going to have readiness demand signals. So you're still going to have, that's the modernization. There's readiness demand signals. There's, direct support to current. So I think I was just reflecting as we're sitting here, and I don't want to oversell that there's going to be one demand signal for the entire Air Force, because I think that would break us, right? And it would break industry, and it would squash some of the innovation that we have. But think about, in terms of modernization, the power of making an order of magnitude change in that clarity and knowing where to actually go to kind of get that source of truth and that vector. So as you're still working with the MAJCOMs, as you're still working with the PEOs individually, as you're still working with your program offices, we all have that common. I'm looking at the lights there, right? That guide star that we're all getting on the same page. So,
Yeah, I mean, we're going to
is
have.
that-
Yeah, you're spot on. Single, obviously, is not the right term. The MAJCOMs will still work with the POs and fight tonight activities, readiness, sustainment. And this is why it's important to, it's worth mentioning that the IACC folks at the Langley, Scott, Barksdale, they're going to be repatched to the ICC, but they're going to be sitting right by side with the people that are still within those MAJCOMs working readiness and sustainment. So there's going to be synergy there that are going to they're going to influence the weapon system roadmaps that we need to make sure we have a clear picture what those things say, because that's going to impact both demand signals.
So before we leave kind of the opening question there of, hey, how does industry, maybe academia, need to come along this journey with us? I'd also like to specifically, maybe Mr. Phillipson, are there any specifics in that area, regarding the S&T industrial base of changes that you see they may need to make to partner better, specifically with the labs on kind of the front end of this whole development process?
Yeah. So in terms of AFRL, like how to partner with us, we're not having a massive C-state change here. Largely, we're unchanged with regard to mission and organizational construct. And the reason is because we've kind of been lead turning some of this integrated developmental planning resurgence, which is what we should do as a lab. We don't have it all figured out, but if you think about it, a lot of what we're doing is kind of taking the demand signal from like operational imperatives and that, and what we've learned in standing up, some of the newer programs, and just really institutionalizing this. So in terms of direct interface with us, we have the AFRL front door. We have our individual technical directorates that are deep in our technologies, human performance, the 711 Human Performance Wing with their work in training and looking at how do we get the performance out of the human. But we also have what we set up several years ago which was an integrated capabilities directorate, which helps kind of harvest technology from across our directorates to work closer in the areas that we need to deliver larger capability and work more on the upper end of that TRL scale. And we have our transformational capabilities division within there. So structurally, there's not a big change there. As you start working with AFRL, one of the things that you can help us do as you're hearing the demand signal and we're hearing the demand signal is how do we synchronize the science and technology ecosphere? We're doing that within AFRL, across our directorates, across the different programs that we're working, but it's larger than AFRL, right? It's the S&T industrial base, it's the S&T ecosphere. So if you can help us, all good ideas are welcome, right? Not the bad ones, we don't want those, no. All ideas are welcome, some are good, some are not. But helping to synchronize the S&T to be able to prioritize where we're working. As you're doing your IRAD, think about you're naturally going to want that IRAD to have good ROI, right? So let's get together, let's explore and pick apart the demand signal, the capability demand signal, and the tech gaps to figure out what is the science that's behind there. What can we do to help buy down risks so that you all can accelerate and scale and deliver, which is a lot of what we do. And as you're aligning your kind of resources within, that's also a big change, or not a big change, but definitely a big focus area for AFRL is, I always say when you have a bunch of demand signals, you're doing a lot of work, but you're kind of heading in a lot of directions. With at least a guide star on where we think the Air Force is going, it's not going to be 100% right. You align everything, you're probably going to be, like I said earlier, 100% sure that we're going to be wrong. But at least you can kind of like narrow that funnel, or at least head in the right hemisphere, right? Maybe head in the right direction, which allows you to kind of add all those vectors together and get a lot further. I'm geeking out here, I know, but I think if you can, within industry, if you can think that way and figure out how can you align your S&T investments, how can you take a portion and directly deliver, but then partner with AFRL to be thinking about that push aspect too. What are the things that they're not asking for? So that's where I've got.
So I want to jump to some of the questions from the audience, and I'll try to weave some of these together. I think a lot of them are interrelated, but specifically there's a couple of them here that we've at least touched on tangentially, but I just want to make sure that we really address them directly. So some of these have to do with the idea of getting after rapid delivery, both of R&D capabilities, and then getting rapid delivery of a fully fielded capability, and how those might tie together with the changes we've discussed here. Maybe touch just a little bit more on how we think digital material management can help us not only achieve more rapid delivery of solutions, but those integrated solutions. And I would say not just integrated solutions, but what are the solutions that provide the integration between the capabilities, right? So maybe if we could talk a little bit about that, the digital material management, and any specific changes that are coming with regard to how do we go faster? How do we deliver faster? Anyone on the panel can jump in.
I'll start. Again, I'll just use the vignette of the next generation air dominance family systems model. So broadly, we talked about some of the pillars. It's agile contracting aspects of it, if it makes the most sense, where we can have vendor pools. One of the foundational pieces of the success of how we're achieving our objectives within that particular division is the digital material management, and using Mr. Phillipson's term, it's a guiding star for Air Force Material Command. It's a strategic priority for General Richardson, and it's foundational to how we actually acquire for those family of systems, where we have the ability to be connected directly with our industry partners in how we do software development, how we're doing structural development of understanding those particular platforms, and the ability for us to have that knowledge parity to make informed decisions at the time of relevance. It's an investment. It's something that you have to be willing to make. And it's one working with Air Combat Command, in this particular case for us, where they have supported us to make those investments. So I would just offer that DMM, the acronym, it's foundational to rapid delivery, because it allows you to be able to partner together with industry, the operators, and the acquirers on how you make informed decisions to be able to achieve the respective attributes that you're trying to achieve. And then I'll just kind of pick at the term attributes. It's the ability to be able to work towards a particular requirement, but not a hard requirement. So we actually can iterate together with industry and iterate together with the operators on what is good enough to achieve the mission outcome, so that we can start delivering capabilities in a more rapid fashion. All of that's done through that digital material management framework that allows us to have agile software development, agile information exchange, and agile development around the requirements, all based upon and tied to architectures. Breaking the vendor lock, so we have a government reference architecture that allows vendors from across the spectrum to be able to be a part of the acquisition as we're trying to deliver capability.
And so the next question we've got, again.
You mind if I touch on that
go ahead.
one?
Yes, sir.
We got a little bit of time. just kick me if I go too long.
for it, you're on a roll.
From an S&T perspective, I think the digital material management, it's a game changer, right? So as you're at the beginning of your S&T, a lot of traditionally what we're doing is a ton of research and analysis, and it's all spreadsheets and individual, and you're in a lab and you're taking all your data in your notebook, and all that's just left on the lab floor, right? So you've got a solution now, you got an IT, you try to pass that across the valley of death, and you don't have any history other than maybe a tech report that's filed in DTIC or whatever. And then, of course, you got to reduce risks on the other side, so you redo a lot of that, or industry ends up redoing that. So starting that digital thread early and even in the laboratory, where when you do get something that's ready to transition and transition quicker into a program, you're also bringing along with that the foundational trade studies and analysis and integrated into the model, that knowledge. And we got to figure out how do we put that at contract so we can get that, and it's not a stack of paper this big, right? But if you can bring that with you, not only do you not have to do all that rework, and you can go right into like burning down the risk that's left, not re-burning down the risk that you already burnt down, but you take that digital thread through the whole life cycle all the way to sustainment, right? So now you're in a sustainment area and you're having an issue and you're looking at a rework or a redesign. You can kind of look back through that digital thread and see, all right, we already did a lot of that foundational work. We don't have to redo that foundational work to think about a fix if we make this change. That was solution number 2 anyway. Let's do that, as opposed to making a mistake that we already learned a decade ago that we shouldn't have done that, and that's why we didn't design it in the first place. So it's just I think that digital material management and that thread through the whole acquisition process is also just a very powerful concept.
So Daryl's really my straight man, because I was going to go to the sustainment piece in here, but you went there for me. So even today, if we can start to move in that direction, that allows us to do a couple things. You want to think about, we talked about how we could bring something more quickly to the line, but we're also talking about the existing weapon systems and making them more ready, right? We're having difficulty making them ready today so that they can fight a war. And then keeping them ready through that conflict for however long it might be. Having this digital thread that allows us to work, it will also allow us to share information. Believe it or not, there are times when somebody says, hey, I have a problem in a hydraulic system, in let's say a C-17, but it actually ends the same hydraulic component that's in the B-52. And yet we don't share that data as readily, and we would be able to actually share the data and then capture the information, as Daryl says, that leads us to not make the same mistake twice. And we can work with the contractor or contractors, if that's the case, to better the system so that we have better quality parts that allows us to maintain a higher level of readiness in the field, which is going to be extremely important to us.
Absolutely.
I'll just say real quick, in the front end, there's some benefits too, right? We're going to stop doing the false starts that we tend to have where we have requirements creep, or we start something and then we stop because nobody knew that was going on, and the decision maker with the dollars says, no, we're not paying for that. Now there's centralized authorities and clear roles and responsibilities for the ecosystem for capability development. So there's not going to be the whole, circular, analysis paralysis that we tend to have today before we actually start a program.
So quickly, I want to tie in another set of questions that we're getting, because I think it really dovetails off of the idea of foundational. Sir, you talked about data. Rod, you're talking about architectures, and that is, are there changes coming to how we approach our data management because I think it kind of underpins a lot of what we've been talking about today, right? So are there some changes that we are implementing across any of your organizations on how you do data management, how you think about that, that you can maybe touch on?
I'll start. Within Fighters and Advanced Aircraft, again, it's easier early on with a new weapon system. It's harder for a fielded weapon system, and frankly, it depends upon, for our fielded weapon systems, it depends upon your product support strategy, and essentially how are we, as lifecycle managers, sustaining that aircraft and ensuring that it's always readily available. So we look at it through that lens. We work with the center where within LCMC, they have an office that's responsible for product lifecycle management. And we make a determination, through that return on investment, what makes the most sense on how we sustain the weapons system, on whether we're driving things into that digital environment. And it will depend upon how that aircraft is sustained. Some of our aircraft, like the F-22, is primarily working with our industry partner, Lockheed Martin. Others are more organically sustained, where we work with Air Force Sustainment Center. And so each one of those drives then a different set of tools that you would use. So I would just say broadly, easier to do early on. For those fielded systems that are within the Fighters and Advanced Aircraft portfolio, we look at them through the lens of that product support strategy and make very calculated decisions based upon the return on investment of what DMM, digital material management, would bring.
I will add, from the standpoint of the test and training, data management changes are crucial. We have been collecting data for decades, but then it goes into la la land and nobody can ever look at it. There's no way to review it. There's no way to access it. We recreate it every time, and every time we pay for it. And we need to stop doing that. With the advantages of cloud systems, the advantages of easier network connectivity, it allows us to actually get that data and use it for model development for some of our simulators and advanced systems. Allow us to then recreate test environments so we can actually get some either decisions or changes to the way the system was designed. It allows us to also be able to recreate some of the environments that on the sustainment side that we couldn't any other way do, because the suppliers are not available anymore, and we had to kind of re-engineer or look at those. So it is critical. In the case of PEO training, it's something that we are looking very closely, both on the areas of the specific simulation, obviously the joint simulation environment, which Colonel Ryan is very familiar with, as we go forward, and how we ensure that all this data that is available to us, it is available to the enterprise to utilize as we need it to develop the tools that we are right now paying twice for.
Thank you. So, okay, we're coming around third. We're almost to home plate here. So 60 to 90 seconds each. Just kind of closing thoughts. What would you like the audience to leave with and think about as they walk out the door and ponder as they, move forward? And we'll start at the far end and kind of just work our way this way.
I get to go first. Okay.
Absolutely.
I beat the drum. I would just say embrace architectures, embrace breaking vendor lock, be a part of the vendor pools that allows us to be able to deliver capability in the safest and most rapid fashion, and that's done through looking at through the lens of a systems-to-systems approach and not necessarily a vertical approach. Where appropriate, back to Mr. Phillipson's point, sometimes it does make sense. So thanks very much.
I'd like to leave you with, you now have a default location for capability development for new capabilities, the ICO, the ICC, and the IDO. And so these officers are going to collaborate together, but we're going to need collaboration from industry, academia, FRDCs, the PAOs, and the lab. So all of us working together, we're going to hopefully revamp how we do capabilities for the future of the Air Force. The IDO does have an industry engagement cell specifically to provide a front door for industry. So once the ICC provides that capability demand signal in the spring, please reach out and work with us to make it better. And then I'll ask for patience. Everybody here knows that standing up a new organization is difficult. Change management is hard. And so right now the IDO is in the midst of both of those. So we're going to have contracting opportunities for industry in the future, but that's not going to happen this month or next week. So just patience is what I ask for. Thanks.
So from the perspective of PEO training, I think as the team walks out here, I would like you guys to keep a couple of things in mind. There is a dedicated group of acquisition professionals now focused on the training perspective. And what that comes is the ability to take from all parts of the enterprise and put them together for solutions, for training, unique to that, and actually focus on that specific problem set. It's not something that we had in the past, and but it's critical not only because of the guidance that our leadership is giving us, but also from years of experience that ensuring the right kind of training is vital for us to get the mission accomplished. But I also recognize it's not perfect. So we all talk about how we need to do more horizontal integration. Vertical integration is not good. Well, there's a reason why vertical integration was put together in the first place, because it allows us to ensure that within that functional line, everything was linked up, the platform. So as we actually go into this training enterprise look, which is more about that horizontal integration, we need to make sure we stay in lockstep with the different platforms and different systems, so certainly we don't break that connectivity. So it's going to be a challenge, but I think the team is up for it, and we are ready to go after it. So looking forward to a great set of systems coming up out of PEO training.
Thanks. So, you can kind of tell I'm excited about this change for what I think it brings to AFRL, the opportunities it brings for industry. Some might say passionate about it. So I think what I want to leave the group with is hopefully you've got a piece of that you can take with you, because we're really excited about teaming with industry and collaborating and making this evolution together. And just remember this, although it's word salad, we're throwing out all kinds of new things, right? It's not a disjointed from where we were before. It's really an evolution and a focusing of AFRL that I think brings a lot of advantages, not just to warfighting and to the DoD and to the Air Force mission, but I think it will help industry as well. I started with a joke. I'm going to end with a real quick joke too. So a little bit of audience participation again. I'm sorry, you got to pick one or the other. Marvel or what's the other one? DC, and you can tell I'm Marvel, right? Marvel, raise your hand. You got to pick one or the other? All right, DC? All right. So I don't know if you all heard, so I'm probably not the first to release this, but it might upset some folks. Have you guys heard that, like, Superman is going to be teaming up with Silver Surfer, or what's his name? Yeah, Silver Surfer, in like a new film, right? Yeah, apparently they're alloys. I told you, I just came from a materials conference. They loved it.
That is a real dad
They're
joke.
alloys.
That's a dad joke.
All right, over to you.
Hey, so
Keep my day job. I got it.
I will end it with this. We are inextricably linked in helping the nation move forward in what we need to do as a military. So we all have to produce the promise, right? So we have to produce what we told you we were going to do so that we can give you a better idea of what we need from you, and then you have to produce the promise to make that happen. So we keep the lines of communication open because I think that's very important. When I worked in the combatant commands, I worked for CENTCOM, and the commander at CENTCOM at that time, his name was General Joe Votel. And he would say this all the time: never underestimate your impact to the mission by your proximity to the fight. I'll just repeat it. Never underestimate your impact to the mission by your proximity to the fight. We all, regardless of how far away we are from the mission, have an impact. So I just continue to say, well, let's work together as a team to make sure the mission actually happens, because the real customer is not our bosses or anything like that. It's the poor person who's in the middle of the field getting shot at someplace, who just prays that the airplane or the weapon system shows up so they can come home with loved ones. If we keep that in mind, we'll all work together as one team for one fight. So I thank you for your time today. Thanks for letting us talk to you, and we look forward to hearing from you as well. I'm out.
Thanks, sir. So I'll echo that. So first, thank you to the panelists. Appreciate you sitting in on this with us. Thank you to the audience for joining us this morning. Thank you for your participation. I know we didn't get to every question, but thank you for the participation. I hope that this helped frame some things in your minds as to how we can collaborate better together. And I'll also say thank you for your support to our Air Force, to our joint and coalition partners. Just as Mr. D'Angelo said, right, at the end of the day, we cannot afford to be quibbling about the small stuff here because we're supporting guys and gals downrange in the MAF, CAF, SOF forces, right? That's where the mission is. We're here to support their mission and deliver them more winning capabilities. So appreciate all you do in supporting that effort. Thank you.